Matt Damon storms off The Late Show after Stephen Colbert's relentless mockery turns a promotional interview into a public spectacle. "I didn't come here for this," Damon declares before abandoning his seat, leaving viewers and crew in stunned silence. The studio lights dimmed as the familiar Late Show theme music faded. Stephen Colbert adjusted his glasses with a smirk that would soon become infamous across social media platforms nationwide. Sitting across from him, Matt Damon offered a practiced smile, unaware of the ambush awaiting him. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we have Hollywood's favorite water conservationist, Matt Damon," Colbert announced, his tone carrying an edge that the audience didn't immediately register. "Here to promote his latest film where he once again plays a good guy because apparently that's all he can do." The audience's laughter came hesitantly as Damon nodded, his smile tightening. "Thanks for having me, Stephen. Always good to be here." "Is it, though?" Colbert countered, leaning forward. "Because last time you were here, your movie tanked the following weekend. So I'm wondering if my show is your box office curse." The camera caught Damon's momentary confusion. This wasn't the light-hearted banter he'd prepared for. "Well, I think there were a lot of factors at play there." "Like your performance?" Colbert interjected, drawing a collective gasp from the audience. "Because critics called it phoned in. If I remember correctly." Damon shifted uncomfortably, glancing briefly at his publicist standing off stage. "I don't think that's exactly—" "Let's talk about your new film," Colbert continued, not allowing Damon to complete his defense. "You play an astronaut again. Is it because you're running out of original ideas, or just trying to recapture the glory days of The Martian?" The studio temperature seemed to drop several degrees. The audience, typically primed for laughter, sat in uncomfortable silence. Something was clearly off with their usually charming host. "The film actually explores themes of isolation and redemption," Damon explained, attempting to steer the conversation back to professional territory. "It's a human story about connection in an increasingly disconnected world." Colbert rolled, his eyes dramatically. "Right, because what the world needs is another movie about a sad white guy in space learning life lessons. Groundbreaking stuff." The first commercial break couldn't come fast enough. As the cameras cut away, Damon leaned over to Colbert. "What's going on? Did I do something to upset you?" Colbert shrugged, refusing to meet Damon's gaze. "Just doing my job. Interviews are supposed to be interesting, not promotional fluff pieces." "There's a difference between interesting and hostile," Damon countered, his famous composure beginning to crack. When the cameras returned, the tension was palpable. Social media was already lighting up with clips from the opening segment, viewers speculating about the obvious friction between host and guest. "We're back with Matt Damon," Colbert announced. "Let's talk about your water charity work, which I find fascinating given Hollywood's notorious water waste. How do you reconcile preaching conservation while living in an industry built on excess?" Damon took a deep breath. "My work with water.org isn't about pointing fingers. It's about recognizing that access to clean water is a fundamental human right. A fundamental human right that costs $14.99 to see in IMAX," Colbert interrupted. "Isn't there something ironic about making millions from movies while fundraising for those who can't afford basic necessities?" The audience shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't the Colbert they knew, the witty, incisive host whose political commentary was balanced with genuine warmth toward his guests. "I think most people understand that using my platform to raise awareness—" Damon started. "Your platform." "Interesting choice of words," Colbert cut in. "Speaking of platforms, let's talk about your platform shoes. Do you wear them in all your films or just when you're feeling insecure around taller co-stars?" A stagehand visibly winced. The show's producer was now in frantic conversation with other staff members just off camera. "I don't wear platform shoes." "Stephen," Damon replied, his voice tightening, "maybe we should focus on the film?" "Oh, I'd love to focus on the film," Colbert responded with exaggerated enthusiasm. Particularly that scene where you're supposedly doing your own stunts. My sources tell me that was mostly camera tricks and your stunt double earning a fraction of your salary. Damon's publicist was now on her phone, likely trying to reach the show's executive producer. This had gone well beyond the boundaries of typical talk show banter. "I've always been transparent about stunt work," Damon said, his legendary patience visibly wearing thin. "And I've always advocated for proper recognition and compensation for stunt performers." "How noble," Colbert remarked sarcastically, "almost as noble as claiming to support environmental causes while flying private to climate conferences." The audience was now completely silent, the atmosphere thick with discomfort. Several people exchanged concerned glances, wondering if they were witnessing a genuine breakdown of professionalism or some elaborate misguided bit. "I actually fly commercial to most events," Damon corrected him, his jaw tightening. "Stephen, I'm not sure what's happening here, but—" "What's happening is a real interview," Colbert snapped. "Not the carefully orchestrated publicity stops you're used to. Don't you think audiences deserve authenticity?" The show's band leader shot a concerned look at the producer, who was now frantically signaling for another commercial break. But Colbert wasn't finished. "Let's talk about your writing career," he continued, ignoring the break signal. "Won Oscar 25 years ago, and you're still riding that wave. Do you think you've been coasting on that early success?" The dam finally broke. Damon set his water glass down with controlled force. "I came here to have a conversation about my work, not to be insulted for cheap ratings." "What's going on with you tonight?" "Oh, I'm sorry," Colbert retorted, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Did you expect me to just lob softballs and laugh at your rehearsed anecdotes like every other host? Maybe that works for Jimmy Fallon." A producer was now on stage, standing just outside the camera frame, desperately trying to catch Colbert's attention. The hashtag #Colbert Meltdown was already trending nationwide, clips of the increasingly hostile interview spreading across platforms at lightning speed. "You know what, Stephen?" Damon said, reaching for his microphone clip. "I've respected your work for years. I've always thought you were one of the smarter voices in late night. But this?" He gestured between them. "This isn't smart or funny or even good television. It's just mean." Colbert leaned back, something unreadable flashing across his face. Was it regret? Defiance? The audience couldn't tell, but they knew they were witnessing something unprecedented. "Mean. Or just honest," Colbert challenged. "Hollywood's problem is that it can't handle honest feedback. Everyone's so insulated by yes-men that the slightest criticism feels like an attack." Damon unclipped his microphone, a line crossed that no publicist could have prepared for. "I didn't come here for this," he said quietly, his controlled voice carrying more impact than any shouting match could. The studio fell completely silent as he stood up, leaving the small microphone on his vacated chair. For a moment Colbert seemed genuinely stunned. This wasn't supposed to happen. Guests didn't walk off his show, especially not A-listers with decades of media training. A flash of panic crossed his face before he recovered, doubling down with a dismissive wave. "Ladies and gentlemen, it appears Matt Damon can't handle a few tough questions," Colbert announced to the stunned audience. "Perhaps he should stick to scripted lines." Damon paused at the edge of the stage, turning back slowly. The cameras captured his expression. Not anger, but something more devastating. Disappointment. "You know what, Stephen? I've sat through hundreds of interviews. I've been roasted, criticized, and questioned. That comes with the territory." Damon's voice carried through the silent studio without need for amplification. "But there's a difference between sharp commentary and whatever this is." A production assistant hurriedly approached with a handheld microphone, but Damon waved it away. The audience was now completely transfixed, social media feeds exploding as viewers shared clips in real time. The hashtag Damon walks out, joining Colbert Meltdown at the top of trending topics. "This isn't about tough questions," Damon continued, addressing not just Colbert, but the entire audience. It's about basic respect. For 20 years, I've respected you as someone who uses comedy to speak truth to power, not to ambush guests for cheap applause. Colbert's smile tightened, his usual quick wit failing him as he reached for his index cards. Well, I'm sorry if you find honesty uncomfortable. Perhaps next time. There won't be a next time, Damon interjected, causing another wave of gasps. The show's executive producer was now visible at the edge of the frame, frantically signaling to cut to commercial. You think I'm walking off because I'm thin-skinned? Damon asked, stepping back toward Colbert. I'm walking off because whatever's going on with you tonight isn't what I signed up for. It's not what your audience signed up for either. The camera panned briefly to the audience, capturing their uncomfortable expressions. Several were nodding in agreement with Damon's assessment. My audience expects me to ask the questions other hosts won't, Colbert retorted, but his trademark confidence was noticeably diminished. Your audience expects better than cheap shots about my height and personal attacks masked as interview questions, Damon countered. Look at them, Stephen. They're not laughing. Indeed, the studio audience sat in uncomfortable silence. The usual energy of the show completely evaporated. The band leader exchanged glances with his musicians, unsure whether to intervene with music. You've built a career on being smarter than this, Damon continued, his voice softening slightly. Whatever's going on tonight, this isn't you. At least, not the you that people have respected for years. Something flickered across Colbert's face. Perhaps recognition, perhaps regret. For a brief moment, the hostility dropped, replaced by something more vulnerable. Then, as quickly as it appeared, it vanished behind a renewed mask of sarcasm. Well, thank you for the career assessment. Perhaps you'd like to direct me too. I hear that's your next ambition. A producer was now openly on stage, clipboard in hand, desperately signaling for a commercial break. Colbert ignored her, locked in what had become a public battle of wills with his departing guest. The studio doors swung open as Damon's publicist entered, followed by the show's head writer. Their hushed but intense conversation was picked up by nearby microphones, fragments audible to the viewing audience. Completely unprofessional. Never agreed to this approach. Needs to stop now before... Damon raised his hand, silencing his publicist. It's okay, I can handle this. He turned back to Colbert, who sat rigid behind his desk, knuckles white against his index cards. You know what the irony is, Stephen, Damon said, his voice steady despite the unprecedented situation. I came here tonight prepared to talk about a film that deals with exactly this, how people lash out when they're hurting, how cruelty is often just pain in disguise. The audience shifted, the atmosphere transforming from uncomfortable spectacle to something more complex. Even the cameramen exchanged glances, unsure where to focus as the planned interview had evolved into something entirely unscripted. I don't need your amateur psychology, Colbert snapped, but the comment lacked his earlier sharpness. No, you don't, Damon agreed. But you might need a friend. Whatever's happening tonight isn't about me or my movie. That much is obvious to everyone watching. Social media was now exploding with speculation. Was Colbert having a breakdown? Was this an elaborate publicity stunt? Or was there some behind-the-scenes conflict the public wasn't privy to? The executive producer finally stepped fully into frame, placing a hand on Colbert's shoulder. We need to break, she said firmly, no longer concerned about being picked up on camera. For a moment, Colbert seemed ready to shrug her off, to continue whatever self-destructive path he'd committed to. Then, with visible effort, he nodded once. We'll be right back, he announced mechanically as the theme music began playing. Far too late to mask what had transpired. As the cameras cut away, Damon didn't move from his position at the edge of the stage. Neither did the audience, many of whom had their phones out, documenting what had already become the most discussed late-night incident in years. During the commercial break, the studio erupted into frantic activity. Production assistants huddled, with writers, executives made urgent phone calls, and Damon's publicist engaged in heated conversation with the show's producer. Audience members murmured among themselves, torn between discomfort and the voyeuristic thrill of witnessing authentic drama on what was typically a carefully choreographed show. Colbert remained seated at his desk, uncharacteristically still as chaos swirled around him. His expression was unreadable as he stared at his notes without seeing them. Across the stage, Damon consulted quietly with his team, occasionally glancing back at the host with an expression that had shifted from anger to something approaching concern. The floor director's countdown indicated they would be live again in 30 seconds. The executive producer approached Damon with placating hands raised. "Matt, please," she said in a hushed, urgent tone. "We can salvage this. One more segment." "I think we're well past salvaging," Damon replied, loud enough for nearby audience members to hear. "What happened to him?" he asked, nodding toward Colbert, who sat isolated at his desk while staff frantically conferred around him. The producer hesitated, glancing over her shoulder before lowering her voice. "His father's cancer came back. He found out this morning. He insisted on doing the show anyway. We tried to talk him out of it, but—" She trailed off, professional discretion warring with the unprecedented situation. Understanding washed over Damon's face. The floor director's fingers counted down. 5, 4. "Give me my mic back," Damon said suddenly. "What?" The producer blinked in surprise. "The mic. I'm going back out there." 3, 2. Damon strode back to the guest chair just as the on-air sign illuminated. The audience erupted in surprised applause as he sat down, the abandoned microphone now back on his lapel. Colbert looked up, genuine surprise breaking through his brittle facade. "Welcome back to The Late Show," Colbert began mechanically. "Surprisingly, our guest Matt Damon has—" "I think we got off on the wrong foot," Damon interrupted, his tone completely transformed. "Let's start over." The tension in the studio remained palpable, but shifted into something different, anticipation rather than discomfort. Even Colbert seemed momentarily at a loss, his prepared barbs suddenly inappropriate in the face of Damon's unexpected return. "You know, I've been thinking about what you said earlier," Damon continued, taking control of the segment. "About authenticity, about how audiences deserve more than rehearsed anecdotes and promotional talking points." Colbert's posture remained rigid, but something in his expression changed. Wariness giving way to cautious curiosity. "You're right," Damon said simply. "So let's try something different. Not as host and guest, but as two people having an actual conversation. No cards, no prepared questions." He reached over and gently took Colbert's index cards, setting them aside. The audience held its collective breath. "Sometimes life hits us with things we're not prepared for," Damon said, his voice softer now but perfectly audible in the silent studio. "And sometimes we show up to work when maybe we shouldn't, because the routine feels safer than facing what's really going on." Colbert's carefully constructed mask slipped. For a brief moment the millions watching glimpsed the man behind the persona. Vulnerable, exhausted, and carrying a burden he'd tried unsuccessfully to set aside for an hour of television. "I don't know what you're dealing with," Damon continued, the lie necessary and kind. "But whatever it is, taking it out on guests isn't the answer. And I think you know that." For several heartbeats, the outcome remained uncertain. The production team watched tensely from the wings, prepared to cut to commercial at the first sign of another meltdown. Instead, Colbert did something unexpected. He laughed, a genuine if pained sound that contained equal parts humor and acknowledgement. "Ladies and gentlemen," Colbert said, addressing his audience directly for the first time since the interview went off the rails, "what you're witnessing is why Matt Damon has had a 20-year career in an industry where most flame out after one success." He turned to face his guest. "I owe you an apology." The studio exhaled collectively as Colbert removed his glasses, pinching the bridge of his nose momentarily before continuing. "You're right. This isn't about you or your film. I came in tonight with personal baggage that should have stayed at the door. He replaced his glasses, regaining some of his composure. That was unprofessional, and I'm sorry. Social media exploded anew, the narrative shifting from the Colbert meltdown to real moment on TV, as viewers witnessed something rarely seen in the polished landscape of late-night television. Genuine human connection breaking through the entertainment facade. I think we've all had days where we've taken personal pain out on undeserving targets, Damon responded, the tension in his shoulders visibly easing. The difference is, most of us don't do it on national television. Ripples of laughter spread through the audience. Not the usual prompted response to a rehearsed joke, but the authentic relief of witnessing conflict resolution rather than escalation. So, Damon continued, want to talk about the actual movie now? Or should we just be honest about the fact that neither of us is really in the headspace for a standard promotional interview tonight? For the first time that evening, Colbert's smile reached his eyes. How about neither? Let's talk about something real instead. He leaned forward. You've been in this business a long time. How do you handle the days when showing up seems impossible, but canceling isn't an option? What followed was 15 minutes of television unlike anything the show had produced before. Gone was the usual rapid-fire banter and rehearsed anecdotes, replaced by a conversation about resilience, public personas, and the toll of maintaining them. Viewers watched in fascination as two public figures spoke with rare candor about the challenges of balancing personal struggles with professional obligations. My father always said that character isn't what you do when everyone's watching, Damon shared, the promotional talking points about his film long forgotten. It's what you do when you think no one is. But in our world, someone's always watching. That's the paradox, isn't it? Colbert replied, his trademark wit now tempered with genuine reflection. We're most authentic when we forget the cameras, but the cameras never forget us. As the segment drew to a close, neither man had mentioned Damon's film directly. Yet, social media metrics showed engagement levels higher than any episode in the show's history. The hashtag #ColbertDamon Reel was trending nationally, with viewers praising the unexpected depth of the exchange. We need to wrap up, Colbert said finally, glancing at the clock. But I want to thank you, not just for coming back to that chair when you had every reason to leave, but for turning what could have been the worst interview of my career into whatever this became instead. I think this became a conversation, Damon replied simply. Maybe we should try it more often. As the show cut to its final commercial break, audience members rose in a spontaneous standing ovation. Production staff exchanged looks of relief and something approaching awe. What had begun as a potential career-damaging disaster had transformed into a moment of rare authenticity that would be discussed in entertainment circles for years to come. Backstage, away from the cameras, Colbert extended his hand to Damon. Thank you, he said quietly. Not many would have come back to that chair. Take some time, Damon replied, clasping the host's hand. Some things are more important than the show. Colbert nodded, the briefest acknowledgement of the personal struggle he hadn't directly confirmed on air. The following morning, clips of the interview dominated social media and news programs. Cultural commentators dissected every moment, praising both men for transforming a potential train wreck into a masterclass in conflict resolution and authentic communication. Network executives reported record-breaking numbers as viewers who had heard about the confrontation sought out the full episode online. 1 week later, Colbert opened his show with a simple statement. Last week, I demonstrated exactly how not to do this job. Tonight, I'd like to show you what I've learned. He announced a brief hiatus to spend time with family, promising to return with a renewed commitment to the thoughtful, incisive comedy that had built his reputation. When ratings for Damon's film were tallied the following weekend, they significantly exceeded projections. In interviews about its success, Damon consistently deflected questions about the Colbert incident, saying only, "Sometimes the most meaningful conversations happen when the script goes out the window."